been suggested in part by the Institute for Wisconsin's Future, think tank based in Milwaukee. Over the last 20 years, state aid to school districts has been a smaller and smaller portion of the total cost of quality public education. Our children are receiving fewer educational opportunities. Governor Walker has reduced revenues to schools by another $1.6 billion in this two-year budget. The result, more teacher layoffs and program cuts hurting children. The legislature can fix the school funding formula by taking two actions. First of all, by passing State Superintendent Tony Evers' Fair Funding for Our Future plan, and second, by approving the Penny for Kids 1-cent increase in the sales tax to restore Walker's $1.6 billion cuts. Now specifically, since we're talking about particular solutions here, the Fair Funding for Our Future plan calls for a base state funding of $3,000 for every student in every district, increases state aid if the district has a high number of students living in poverty, helps district with declining enrollments, increases state aid each year by 2% or the rate of inflation in order to provide financial stability, eases the state revenue limits, and places the school levy tax credit monies into school aids. The Penny for Kids would increase the state sales tax from 5% to 6% on the dollar, producing nearly $900 million per year in revenue that would then be sent to schools as state aids, making up for Walker's cuts. We must begin reinvesting in our children's education. It's not a case of we can't solve the problem. So far, it has been a case of we don't want to solve the problem. So, the question, starting with Senator Vinehout, will you work to implement the Fair Funding for Our Future proposal and the 1-cent increase in sales tax for our kids?
Thank you very much. 2 weeks ago, I put together a 6-point plan on resolving the problems that we face in education. Part of that plan dealt with Tony Evers' Fair Funding for Schools program. When I think about what the problems that our state faces, I think that one of the biggest problems is that we need to reprioritize our investments, and number one needs to be our investments in human potential. It's difficult to do school funding reform in 2 minutes, and I'm going to give it my best shot, but all of the details are posted on KathleenVinehout.org. So the 2-minute version. First of all, we have to restore the money that's been cut from education. We have to bring back the teachers that have been laid off. We have to restore the courses that have been cut. We have to return to smaller class sizes. And my alternative budget that I put together a year ago lists where I would go to find the dollars to do that. In addition to repairing the damage that was done by Governor Walker, we have to move forward to change the formula. I propose a 5-year phase-in, beginning with emergency funding in this coming school year. Those of you who are involved in education know that the coming school year is going to be worse than the current school year for a number of reasons. And then I follow with 2 different budgets in which we would phase in most, but not all, of Superintendent Tony Evers' Fair Funding for Schools. I would adopt the new formula in next year's budget and then fully phase it in the following year. I would hold wealthy schools harmless as I brought up the aid to those schools that are now struggling. At the same time, we need to put in place new accountability measures for all schools, including charter and voucher schools. And that means increasing schools' responsibility for graduation rates, reducing the achievement gap, and holding schools responsible for changes in student performance. I attempted to pass these accountability measures in the waning days of the session, but I was thwarted by my Republican colleagues. We also have to, this wasn't part of the question, but we also have to restore the funding for tech colleges, UW, and invest in needs-based financial aid. And we have to recognize that not all smart students are rich students. Yes, not all smart students are rich students. Finally, we have to make education an honored profession for the best and the brightest of our college graduates choose that career of education and teaching the next generation. Thank you.
The short answer about fair funding and sales tax penny for kids is yes, certainly, naturally, no question. But I guess we've got 3 minutes to talk about it, so rather than stop with a definite yes, I'll tell you.
One thing I did forget to say, Doug, was that if any of the candidates don't want to take their full 3 minutes, you don't have to. You may.
Make sure you deduct his 34 seconds. The title is going to get frustrated. Anyway, one thing that frustrates me is hearing that we're broke. I'm fed up with Mr. Walker and you saying we're broke. We're not broke. We're just not going to take money from the right places, like the 1%, and put it in the places we need it, like education. If we're going to fund education and the tech schools, there are students waiting in line to go to tech schools right now, and there are jobs waiting for them when they get out of tech school. But Walker cuts that by millions of dollars, and he gives it to corporations in special loopholes. I used to be a teacher, and I know that we have to begin to respect teachers. I mean, those are the men and women who spend more time with our kids than many parents spend with their kids. And we have this attitude, that we don't really respect that. And I would change that as governor. I would speak loudly and clearly about how important teachers are. And then we have to talk about having some tuition assistance for young men and women who want to be teachers. And right now have trouble getting into school and paying the tuition they need in order to do that. And one last thing is all of these things we promise and talk about, and I'm careful not to say promise. If I do, start waving your hands, because none of us can do that. We have to have a November election where we elect progressive Republicans, and there's a few out there, and Democrats to the Assembly. Because until the Assembly becomes in the control of like-minded people like us and like the Senate will be very soon, we can't pass these things. So I'm going to, as governor of Wisconsin, travel the state, working with candidates, talking about these issues and why it's so important to elect men and women to the Assembly who will support education, health care, all the things, women's rights, the issues that we all care so much about. That's going to be critical to turn Wisconsin around next year.
I very much appreciate School Superintendent Evers' efforts here because I think we share all these values of trying to improve education. And here's my take on how I would go about doing it. And let me start again with what I said once before, which is I think the single biggest fuel for why a recall is happening is because Governor Walker was not honest with his voters. And one of the ways he was not honest was he never told us he would do the biggest cut in public education in our state's history. He then made a series of wrong choices. He created some big new tax breaks, loopholes for some, and then he had to fund that with this largest cut in public education in our state's history, or attempting to throw 65,000 men, women, and children off their health care. So wrong choices. So me, as governor, will make the single most important investment of state dollars into public education. It is my top priority for spending. And I say this for all the right reasons. Our most valuable resource is our children. The best way to make sure they have successful lives and we grow our economy is to invest in education. Governor Walker's way of big tax breaks for corporations that do not produce jobs, and it fails our children. The stories and the people I have seen over the last year are again why I believe that the biggest cuts in public education are the why we will beat Scott Walker in 51 days. I'm in the south side of Milwaukee, and young students there in college say they're not going to be able to get through college, they fear, because of the tuition increases under Governor Walker. I'm up in Ashland, and young people there come to tell me, one young man says, I'm a student of UW Superior and I want to be a teacher, but 12 of my friends who also want to be teachers have dropped out of that. We don't see a future in education and teaching, given Governor Walker. As a mom, as a governor, that has to stop. And I saw a senior couple, 75 years old, standing out in the cold in Oshkosh with their clipboard to get signatures signed in the recall. I said, why are you out here? It's freezing cold. They said, because the cuts in education are hurting our grandchildren. That is why we will beat Scott Walker in 51 days. I will put together the plans for how I will restore funding for his $36 million cut to the technical college system. Just if you eliminate just one of those tax breaks he created last year, the one that's called the Las Vegas loophole, that cost us $40 million a year. That would fully restore the funding for the technical college system. Not only is that jobs and education for people right now, but we have about over 30,000 job openings in Wisconsin now. Things like welders, pipe fitters, program designers, nurses of every kind. And we have so many people looking for work. And the last thing you want to do as a governor, last thing he should have done as a governor, is cut the technical college system. A way to match people with jobs that get the training they need. And so that's how we'll restore the funding of the technical college system. Finally, my principles on education. Whoops.